Aarvi Menon and Raghav Bansal, a fairytale couple whose wedding dazzled India, until their first night together ended in blood, betrayal, and the horrifying secret that turned love into murder. The wedding day began with golden light spilling across the Arabian Sea, bathing Mumbai's skyline in a glow that felt like magic. Guests arrived in long lines of luxury cars, cameras flashed from every angle, and journalists whispered about the most anticipated wedding of the season. At the center of it all stood Aarvi Menon, a 26-year-old woman whose delicate smile hid the weight of a lifetime of struggles. Dressed in an ivory and gold sari that shimmered under the chandeliers, she looked like every bride's dream. But inside, her heart trembled, not with joy, but with fear. The groom, Raghav Bansal, was a man of power and influence. At 38, he owned one of India's largest real estate empires, with properties stretching from Dubai to Singapore. His name was synonymous with success, but behind his calm charm lived a man obsessed with control and perfection. He believed in image, reputation, and status. He was used to getting everything he wanted, and he believed Aarvi was his reward after years of failed relationships and public scandals. To him, she wasn't just a wife. She was redemption. Their story had captured the media's imagination. The billionaire tycoon marrying a simple girl from Kerala sounded like a modern fairy tale. Newspapers called it a love that crossed all barriers. And social media painted it as proof that dreams could come true. Aarvi's parents, middle-class schoolteachers from Kochi, could hardly believe their daughter had been chosen by such a powerful man. They wept with pride as she walked down the flower-covered aisle, her eyes glistening under the soft light. But while everyone celebrated, Aarvi's thoughts drifted to the one thing she prayed would stay buried forever. She had carried the secret for 3 long years, guarding it as fiercely as her own life. The diagnosis had come unexpectedly after a minor car accident, HIV positive. At first, she had thought her life was over. She isolated herself, hiding the truth from her family, her friends, and eventually from Raghav. With medication, she regained her health, her confidence, and her ability to live normally. Her doctors assured her that with proper care, her condition could remain undetectable and non-transmissible. Still, she knew what society would say if anyone found out. She had seen how people looked at those with the virus, with pity, disgust, or fear. She didn't want to be defined by a disease she never asked for. When Raghav proposed after months of courtship, she convinced herself that love could overcome the past. She promised she would tell him one day, when the time was right. But the time never came. Each moment she delayed, the truth grew heavier, and now, standing beside him before hundreds of guests, she wondered if God had given her happiness or just one last cruel test. The wedding ceremony continued with grand rituals and expensive gifts. A renowned designer had personally crafted her bridal attire. The media broadcasted every moment, from the vows to the exchange of rings. The air smelled of jasmine and sandalwood, the sound of traditional drums echoing through the marble hall. Yet behind her soft smile, Aarvi's mind was a storm. Every glance from Raghav, every promise he made, reminded her of the deception that bound them. Later that evening, the reception unfolded at the grand ballroom of the Oberoi. Thousands of fairy lights glowed like stars suspended in glass, and the dance floor shimmered beneath a canopy of roses. Raghav raised his glass for a toast, thanking everyone for being part of their perfect union. Cameras clicked, guests cheered, and for a brief moment, Aarvi almost believed she could live this lie forever. When the guests began to leave, she stood alone on the balcony overlooking the sea. The wind carried the sound of waves and distant music. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages, but her eyes lingered on one notification from her doctor, a reminder for her next checkup. Her stomach tightened. She deleted it instantly, afraid someone might see. Behind her, Raghav called her to join him for their first night together. She smiled, forcing her fears deep inside. She didn't know that this night, which marked the beginning of her new life, would also become the night that ended it. In that glittering ballroom filled with laughter, flowers, and champagne, no one noticed the quiet tragedy unfolding in her heart. No one saw the way she hesitated before stepping into the suite, as if her instincts warned her of something dark waiting beyond those golden doors. The fairy tale had been written, The cameras had captured perfection, but what they didn't see was the shadow of a secret that would soon destroy everything. Before the grand wedding, before the world knew her as the billionaire's wife, Aarvi Menon's life had been simple, almost ordinary. She grew up in a modest apartment in Kochi, where her father taught mathematics at a local school and her mother ran a small tuition center. Aarvi had always been a bright student, full of dreams and ambition. She wanted to do something meaningful, something that would make her parents proud. After completing her degree in social work, she joined a non-profit organization that helped patients battling chronic illnesses. She spent her days caring for those who had been abandoned by their families, learning the harsh truths of life at an age when most girls were still chasing fantasies. It was during those years at the NGO that she met Karen Thakkar, a young medical intern who volunteered at the same center. Karen was full of life, ambitious, kind, and deeply committed to helping others. For Aarvi, who had grown up shy and reserved, his energy was magnetic. Their connection was instant. They spent long evenings discussing their dreams and hopes, unaware that fate had already written a different story for them. Their relationship blossomed quickly, filled with the innocence of first love. But just as it began to feel real, it ended. Karen's life was cut short in a tragic road accident. Aarvi had been with him that day, sitting beside him when a truck rammed into their car. She survived with minor injuries, but the trauma left her scarred in ways she couldn't describe. During her hospital stay, she underwent a blood transfusion due to internal bleeding. Weeks later, her world shattered when doctors informed her that the transfused blood had been infected with HIV. She was only 22. The days that followed were unbearable. She couldn't stop crying, couldn't sleep, couldn't understand why something so cruel had happened to her. For a long time, she stopped meeting people. She quit her job, avoided her friends, and withdrew from society. She told her parents she was just recovering from emotional trauma, hiding the truth to protect them from shame and heartbreak. Every morning, she took her medication in silence and forced herself to smile, pretending everything was fine. With time, her health stabilized. The treatment worked, and her viral load dropped to undetectable levels. Her doctors assured her that she could live a normal life, even marry and have a family someday. But Aarvi never fully believed that. She feared rejection more than the illness itself. In her mind, no one could ever accept her if they knew. The world was too cruel, too judgmental. When she moved to Mumbai 2 years later to work as an event planner, she reinvented herself completely. She became confident, well-dressed, and independent, a woman who looked like she had everything under control. And that was when Raghav Bansal entered her life. Their first meeting was purely professional. Aarvi's company was organizing a charity gala for one of Raghav's foundations. She handled the event flawlessly, impressing everyone with her calmness and precision. Raghav noticed her immediately. He was used to people who flattered him, but Aarvi was different. She treated him like just another client. Her quiet strength intrigued him. Over the next few months, he began to pursue her, sending flowers, inviting her to dinners, and finding excuses to meet. Aarvi tried to keep her distance, knowing she could never tell him the truth, but the more she resisted, the deeper she fell. When he finally proposed, her mind screamed to say no, yet her heart, tired of fear and loneliness, whispered yes. She told herself love could conquer anything. She convinced herself that since her condition was under control, she wasn't lying. She was just protecting herself. She promised she would tell him one day, maybe after the wedding, when they were settled and secure. Every time she looked into his eyes, guilt burned inside her, but she smothered it with hope. Raghav saw her as the embodiment of purity and grace, the perfect woman he could proudly present to the world. Aarvi knew that illusion was fragile, but she was desperate to hold on to it. Little did she know that fate was preparing to tear down the world she had built with lies and silence. Her secret was not buried. It was waiting for the right moment to surface, and when it did, it would not just destroy her dream of love, but her very life. The night began with music, laughter, and champagne. The wedding reception at the Oberoi had ended hours ago, but the luxury suite reserved for the newlyweds still glowed softly under golden lights. Rose petals were scattered on the bed, candles flickered by the windows, and the faint scent of perfume lingered in the air. To the outside world, it was a night of romance and celebration, but for Aarvi Menon, every passing minute felt like a countdown she couldn't stop. She sat before the mirror, her bridal jewelry removed, her makeup faded, her smile gone. Her hands trembled as she tried to breathe normally, but her chest felt tight. For weeks, she had rehearsed what she would say, how she would finally tell Raghav the truth. But now, with him just a few feet away, she couldn't find the words. She could hear him on the phone in the next room, laughing with one of his business partners, his tone sharp and proud. He was a man basking in triumph. She was a woman drowning in fear. Raghav entered the room a few minutes later, wearing a white robe, holding 2 glasses of wine. His eyes, usually full of control and confidence, softened as he looked at her. He spoke about how lucky he felt, how perfect everything had been. Aarvi smiled faintly, trying to match his joy, but inside she was collapsing. Every time he reached closer, she pulled back slightly, pretending to fix her hair or adjust her sari. She wasn't ready, not tonight, not yet, but fate didn't wait for her to speak. Downstairs in the hotel's private office, Raghav's assistant, Dev Mahajan, was finishing some paperwork related to the wedding expenses. Among the files was a confidential envelope that had arrived from the couple's private clinic earlier that evening. It was a part of their mandatory premarital health check, a process Raghav had insisted upon to ensure transparency before marriage. Dev, assuming it contained some billing documents, had opened it out of habit. What he saw inside made his blood run cold. It was Aarvi's medical report, clearly marked in red letters, *HIV positive, controlled with medication. Dev froze. His instinct told him to keep it quiet, but Raghav was his boss, and nothing stayed hidden from him. Within minutes, the report was forwarded to Raghav's personal email with a short message. "Sir, please see this immediately. It's urgent." Upstairs, Raghav's phone buzzed. He opened the email casually at first, expecting some business update. The moment his eyes fell on the report, his smile vanished. He read it twice, his face turning pale, his breath quickening. The words blurred before him, but the meaning was unmistakable. His bride, the woman he had publicly called pure, honest, and perfect, had been living with HIV and never told him. The world around him seemed to stop. His mind flooded with disbelief, disgust, rage. He stared at Aarvi, who sat unaware of what he had just seen. In his head, betrayal screamed louder than logic. His ego, built on power and control, shattered instantly. He felt deceived, humiliated before a world that worshipped his image. Without saying a word, he stormed toward her. Aarvi froze. She knew something had changed. His face was different now, hard, furious, unrecognizable. The air turned heavy. He threw the phone toward her, the screen still showing the report. Her worst nightmare had come true. The secret she had buried so deep was now exposed in the cruelest possible way. What followed was chaos. He shouted, pacing, breaking glasses, demanding answers. She tried to explain, to calm him, to tell him she never meant to harm him, that she had taken all precautions, that she was safe. But her words were lost in the storm of his fury. He pushed her, shouted again, and the room filled with the sound of crashing objects and muffled cries. No one in the hallway heard a thing. The suite was soundproof, and the guards outside had strict orders not to disturb. Hours passed like minutes. When silence finally returned, the candles had burned out, and the floor was smeared with broken glass and spilled wine. Aarvi lay still near the edge of the bed, her body limp, her face pale, her bridal sari torn and blood-stained. By morning the staff found her. The official call came in at 5:47 a.m. The bride was dead. Raghav claimed she had fallen, that she had slipped and hit her head on the marble floor. He played his part perfectly, appearing shocked and heartbroken. But behind his carefully constructed story lay a night of violence, rage, and a secret that had cost an innocent woman her life. The fairy tale had ended, not in love, but in silence and blood. The morning after Aarvi's death, the hotel suite was sealed off, yet whispers had already begun to spread. The news reached the media within hours. Tragic accident. Billionaire's wife found dead on wedding night. The public mourned what they thought was a heartbreaking accident, another glamorous life cut short. Raghav Bansal played his role flawlessly. He appeared devastated, his face hidden behind dark glasses as he exited the hotel, escorted by security. Cameras captured him holding Aarvi's parents' hands, promising a full investigation. To the world, he was the grieving husband, but behind the curtains, a powerful cover-up had already begun. Raghav's legal team and personal advisors worked through the night, crafting the perfect narrative. Every piece of evidence that could hint at foul play was quietly erased. Surveillance footage from the hallway outside the suite was deleted within hours. Hotel staff were reminded of their confidentiality agreements and offered large sums of money to cooperate. The housekeepers who entered the suite after the incident were transferred, and the hotel's general manager received a personal call from Raghav's lawyer warning him that any breach of privacy would lead to legal consequences. The post-mortem report was handled by a private pathologist on Raghav's payroll. The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma resulting from accidental fall. No mention was made of the bruises around Aarvi's arms or the cuts on her wrists. Her medical records were sealed, and her body was cremated within 24 hours at Raghav's insistence, leaving little trace for future examination. To everyone outside the small circle of insiders, the story was clear. The new bride slipped and fell, and her husband was crushed by grief. But the truth was not buried completely. Among the hotel staff was a young waiter named Rehan Qureshi a 23-year-old working night shifts to pay for his sister's education. Rehan had been assigned to deliver food to the couple's suite that night. When he arrived at the door, he had heard shouting inside. He didn't see the bride, but through the small gap, he saw the reflection of Raghav's face in the mirror, furious, almost unrecognizable. He froze, unsure whether to leave or knock. Minutes later, he saw two of Raghav's bodyguards rush into the room. Something felt wrong. After the incident, when he went to retrieve the tray, the room was in disarray. He spotted a smear of blood near the corner of the bed and a phone on the floor, its screen shattered. But what caught his eye was a small security camera device on the opposite wall, a camera used for the hotel's premium suites, meant for private internal monitoring. He knew if anyone found out he had seen it, his job and maybe his life would be in danger. But curiosity and guilt gnawed at him. The next day, Rehan secretly accessed the staff control system, locating the backup feed of that night. What he saw changed everything. The video showed Raghav dragging Aarvi's motionless body across the room while the guards adjusted the scene, wiping surfaces and removing evidence. The brutality of it made Rehan sick. He copied the footage onto a USB drive and hid it, terrified of what might happen if Raghav's people found out. Days passed, the media moved on, calling it a sad accident, but Rehan couldn't sleep. The image of Aarvi's lifeless face haunted him. Eventually, he reached out to an investigative journalist named Priya Dutt, known for exposing corruption and high-profile crimes. At first, she didn't believe him. Stories involving billionaires often ended in threats, not justice. But when she saw the footage, she knew this was bigger than anything she had ever reported. Priya began digging deeper. She obtained Aarvi's hospital records, her old medical reports, and interviews with her colleagues. It didn't take long for her to piece together the truth. Aarvi's HIV status had been leaked from the same private clinic that conducted the couple's health checks. Someone inside the hospital had passed it on to Raghav's assistant. The entire chain of betrayal was there, hidden beneath wealth and fear. Priya knew what exposing this meant. She would be taking on one of India's most powerful men, a billionaire with connections in politics, law, and media. Yet she couldn't ignore Aarvi's story. It wasn't just about one woman's death, it was about how money and influence could erase a life and rewrite it as an accident. As Priya prepared her report, Raghav's team learned that someone was investigating. The game of silence and exposure had begun, and neither side intended to lose. When Priya Dutt's investigation went live, the internet erupted. The headline spread across every social platform within hours. Exclusive. Video reveals truth behind billionaire's bride's death. The leaked footage showed what the official reports had denied for weeks. In the blurry, grainy recording, Raghav Bansal could be seen standing over Aarvi's lifeless body while his men rearranged the room. It was short, chaotic, and shocking enough to break the illusion that money could bury the truth forever. The story exploded into national outrage. News anchors replayed the video on every channel, dissecting every frame. Hashtags like #justice for Aarvi and #Bansal murder cover-up dominated social media. People who had once admired Rag have now demanded his arrest. Within 48 hours, protests broke out outside his corporate headquarters. His business empire began to crumble as shareholders panicked and investors withdrew. For the first time in his life, Raghav's power no longer protected him, it suffocated him. The police, forced to act under public pressure, reopened the case. Officers raided the hotel and retrieved what little evidence remained. They summoned the staff for questioning, but many were too afraid to speak. Some had already been paid off, others had vanished. Among them was Rehan Qureshi, the waiter who had risked everything to expose the truth. He had gone into hiding after the video leaked, fearing retaliation. He changed numbers, moved apartments, and avoided familiar places, but deep down, he knew they would find him eventually. Priya, meanwhile, became both celebrated and hunted. The more she appeared on television, the more the threats escalated. Anonymous messages filled her inbox, warning her to back off. Unmarked cars followed her to work. Her editor suggested she leave the city for a while, but Priya refused. She believed Aarvi's story deserved justice, no matter the cost. Each night she rewatched the video, her anger mixing with fear. She had seen too many stories like this end quietly, with no arrests, no accountability, just silence. She refused to let Aarvi become another forgotten name. The investigation finally led to Raghav's arrest. Cameras surrounded him as he was escorted from his mansion in handcuffs, his once calm demeanor replaced by rage. He denied everything, insisting the footage was doctored, that it was a conspiracy orchestrated by jealous rivals. His lawyers worked tirelessly to discredit Priya's report, calling it sensational journalism. But the evidence was too strong. Forensic experts confirmed the authenticity of the footage, and the testimony of 2 hotel employees who had come forward sealed his fate. Still, justice in cases involving the powerful was never simple. The trial stretched on for months, filled with delays, appeals, and attempts to manipulate witnesses. Some mysteriously retracted their statements. One of the investigating officers was transferred overnight, and then, as Priya feared, Rehan disappeared. He was last seen leaving his rented apartment late one evening. His phone was later found smashed near the railway tracks, but his body was never recovered. The media speculated, the police gave vague statements, and slowly the noise around his disappearance faded. Priya continued to speak out, even when she knew her own safety was at risk. She attended court hearings, met with Aarvi's parents, and kept the story alive through interviews and social campaigns. Her courage earned her both admiration and isolation. Friends warned her to stop before she became the next target, but she couldn't. Every time she thought of Aarvi, young, hopeful, smiling in her wedding dress, she remembered that silence had already killed one woman. It couldn't kill another. A year later, the court finally pronounced its verdict. Raghav Bansal was found guilty of culpable homicide and evidence tampering. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, though many believed it was too lenient for what he had done. Outside the courthouse, hundreds gathered, holding candles and photos of Aarvi. Her parents stood quietly at the front, their faces a mix of sorrow and pride. For them, justice had come too late, but it had come. The story of Aarvi Menon became a symbol, a reminder of how secrets, stigma, and pride can destroy even the most beautiful lives. Her name became a movement against the silence surrounding diseases and domestic violence. Schools, NGOs, and women's groups used her story as a lesson. Truth may be dangerous, but hiding it can be fatal. Priya continued her work, but she never forgot the cost of exposing the truth. Some nights she still received anonymous messages, reminders that powerful men do not forgive easily, but she no longer feared them. Aarvi's story had already escaped their control. It lived in headlines, in hearts, and in the quiet determination of those who refused to look away. And in that way Aarvi finally found her voice, not in life, but in the justice her death inspired.